Hello, this is the RPG Crawler. I'm going to do a little bit something here that I rarely do, and that is I'm going to kind of rant slash boggle over something. And it's actually news, but it's not meritorious of a news update per se. But I thought, wow, I need to go ahead and sit in front of a camera and think about this for a while. So, for those of you who follow the OSR movement and various old school things in general, and those of you who follow my channel in general, you may know that I talked about a new project by Frank Mentzer recently, and that project was World of Imperia, and he's been out there kind of promoting it. And there was a delay on the Kickstarter until I believe the beginning of next month, October that is. So he's been going around to various sites and offering people a chance to, get in on the Kickstarter and or give him input. And it's supposed to be an expansion for the Greyhawk setting. It was originally an expansion for the Greyhawk setting involving a mix of fantasy and some sci-fi elements, I believe. Not 100% on that. So yeah, he's going forward with that. He's got several of the old school, old guard on hand to go ahead and help flesh it out. So he was on Dragonsfoot, going ahead and trying to hype that up. Now, Dragonsfoot, for those who don't know, is a website that started with a focus on old out-of-print editions of D&D. This was way back in 3rd edition era, and they were focused on 0 through 2nd edition, I believe, was the cutoff, and it was actually a decent source, and it's still a decent source for finding things like character sheets and stuff like that. So kudos to them on keeping that kind of thing up. They've got various adventures and stuff available on the site for these old editions. A big component of the site, however, was their forums, or is their forums. I say was because a lot of people that I know of that look into the thing don't actually visit the place anymore. It has undergone a kind of a shift. The original founder unfortunately passed away and some time ago, and it passed on to their brother, and they're running it now. And it was actually this site was actually where the first stirrings of the OSR movement arose, at least from what I can tell. And it's always been a fairly decent... Well, it has classically been a fairly decent place to go get a look at what some of the old school designers and such involved with the hobby would say. Some of the original events that went on, because a lot of them frequented the boards. In fact, Gygax himself did as well till he passed, as I believe Arneson might have. I know Tim Kask did for a while. He might still be... No. Tim Kask didn't necessarily frequent the place, but he has posted there long, involved discussions of the history of TSR, which I actually appreciate, and I've used as a source in some of my videos, although I didn't credit it, which I probably should have, because Tim Kask is the man. But going forward, in recent years, I've noticed a change in their postings. Now, I don't personally post on forums a whole lot. I lurk and I view and I read and I gather information from sources, but I don't usually engage in discussions on forums. And part of the reason from that is because forums, like much of social media, get very toxic very quickly. And unfortunately, I've said in the past, I don't post on Twitter anymore except for updates on my channel and to tell you guys how I'm doing, but I don't really interact on Twitter anymore, and I barely interact on Facebook anymore. Well, I do interact on Facebook. For those few of you who follow me on Facebook, I do have a Facebook entry for this channel. I really need to do a lot more about it. But I don't usually do these social media things outside of YouTube. It's not because I don't love you, my fans. It's because a lot of what anytime I go onto these large-scale social media things that have a lot of interaction with a lot of different places, people get radical. And I'm not talking about politically, although it's a big part of it, it's a huge part of it. But even basic questions of what a system does or whatever, what kind of RPG, what kind of feel an RPG has, can generate these really vile things that quickly degrade into real toxicity. And it's like the people on the other end don't really understand that there's an actual person on the other end. So that's my reason for not posting in forums a lot of times. That's my reason for not posting on Twitter a lot more than I do. And some of that is to the benefit of this particular channel, because I get to concentrate on making videos with my free time rather than posting on Twitter like certain other personalities did for a while. But I get to focus on, long, some say too long-winded, rants and discussions and such through my videos. And that's stuff that you really don't get involved with on social media and such, and except in forums. And forums are odd because they have like the toxicity of a flash kind of social media, like Twitter. They have that level of toxicity, plus the long-windedness of a video. So you have a lot of issues there. What I've noticed, anyway, I've digressed way off topic there. Basically, I noticed that in increasing years, or in later years, that the level of toxicity on the Dragonsfoot forums did ramp up. And I got to be honest, I wasn't posting to begin with. I was using it as a research thing, but it got to the point where even looking back at old threads for my research on my videos or research on my games, I would see about 4 or 5 pages of useful information, and then it would just denigrate into just devolve into bickering. And apparently, I'm not the only one that feels this way. Apparently, a lot of people have felt this way from viewing other people's forums and such. And I see a lot of people from Dragonsfoot trying to defend it. But I see a hell of a lot more people that say, okay, I no longer I haven't posted on Dragonsfoot for almost like 8-9 years because of the way it'd been going downhill. And so back to my initial whole thing with the news thing and whatever. Frank Mentzer had left Dragonsfoot back in 2015, largely for a lot of the reasons I was talking about with the community not really jiving with him, so to speak. And he apparently took offense or whatever. He left the community willingly back in 2015. Now he came back to kind of get some of their feedback and to hook up and, let's face it, basically promote his new project, Imperia. And what happened was it denigrated. It quickly devolved between posts on the forums and private messages, apparently. It quickly devolved into a position where he said some ill-advised things, where Frank Mentzer said some ill-advised things, but when I'm reading them and they're not entirely off base, especially from an outsider looking at this particular community. I mean, if you're an insider, you got feet in the, if you got horses in the game, that's cool and all. But from an outsider that only visits Dragonsfoot for research and has looked at all of these things without picking sides, but just seen the level of vitriol and such that sometimes get rises there. He wasn't entirely inaccurate. He might have stated it better, but he was not inaccurate in terms of what he posted. And they basically removed him from the site. Now, what it boils down to is that they said something about, let's see, it is with great sadness that I must inform you that we have been compelled to end our relationship with TSR luminary Frank Mentzer. We thank him for everything that he has done in the past for his website and our hobby, but it has become clear over the course of the last year that there are growing irreconcilable differences between him and the ideology of this website. The ideology of a website. This has been divisive and problematic for us, but we have concluded that in the best interest of Dragonsfoot not to play host to such acrimony. Naturally, we wish him no ill will and encourage those of you who wish to interact with him to do so in many other websites he frequents, and he does frequent a lot of websites, and I invite you, if you're looking for any information on Imperia, which I will continue to cover when it comes out, that you look at those other websites. Wow. Okay, so yeah, it was pretty clear he was on the way out because he was getting increasingly testy with his interactions there. He basically believed that Dragonsfoot was run by they were letting trolls have free run of everything and letting people like basically bash things at will. And looking at the forums themselves, he's not wrong. He's not incorrect. Now they say it's like an open policy, which I can respect. But when you then abandon that kind of open policy to take action against one individual, then you're picking sides, and you got to live with the consequences of picking those sides. In this particular case, it's their website. They can moderate it however they want, and I really, I can't. You can do whatever you want. Hell, if somebody was being disruptive in the comments on my YouTube, I've been known to go ahead and throw them in the spam folder or ban them, but not too many times though. I actually don't have that much of a problem because I've got a very, very small community here. Very, very small community, which I appreciate because each one of you, even when we've got our differences, we kind of work that stuff out. But yeah, that's kind of rough, man. Now, does this hurt Frank Mentzer? I don't think so because he's got plenty of other stuff going on, and I believe he was just poking around at Dragonsfoot as a courtesy. Does it hurt Dragonsfoot? Now that's the question. Does it hurt Dragonsfoot? In terms of, I'm going to go ahead and tell you my experience with Dragonsfoot, my last experience with Dragonsfoot. I used to use them to keep up with old school D&D. I was not a poster, but I would go on there and I would keep up with the developments of old school D&D in the early parts of the OSR movement. Lately, a couple months back, I went back to Dragonsfoot to read their stuff. I hadn't been on there for about 3 years. Went back to Dragonsfoot to read some of their stuff in terms of how the OSR movement is progressing. I was going to do a video, and I'm still going to do a video on the OSR movement. It's going to be the last video in my Tabletops and Taverns thing, at least for this particular season, and I've got another season. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. I went on there to go ahead and do some research as to how the OSR movement was developing and how people were just basically taking it because, there's been a plethora of old school based gaming coming out. There's been a reprint of the AD and the original AD&D stuff since the OSR movement started. So some of the old school stuff is actually now very much. It's no longer. It's like they may not be printing it, but it's available now as like PDFs and such, and it's available as premium content or whatever. So, I was going to do this whole video. Well, where does the OSR stand? Where did the retro clone stand in light of the fact that the OSR movement's reason for being, which was to bring these old school games back into the light, is kind of, you're kind of competing against the old school games themselves, which have come back as PDFs, as commercially viable PDFs, as premium reprints, etc. And I went down there to research what people were having to say, and what they were basically having to say was ugly. It was ugly. I mean, the comments, the forum links, and I was just looking at the ones from the past year or two, because I hadn't been on there in a while. But man, it was vicious, and it was vicious it was vicious towards everybody. It was like, I guess the best way to describe it would be looking down at a pack of dogs, because it was like some OSR stuff wasn't old school enough, and some OSR stuff had clearly supplanted the actual stuff. So when the AD&D stuff came out for reprints, people weren't liking it because it wasn't, and I was like, because it wasn't old school enough, and I was like, as an outsider, I was just like, what the hell? And it made it look like the OSR community was this fractious thing, which it is, but it's not. At least from the impression that I'm getting from other sites that I have since visited, and that was actually enough to put me off that entire video. I was like, holy crap, I'm going to delay doing this video, because I remember I announced this thing back. I announced this particular video back in May, and I was up geared to go on it. Then I looked at all that stuff, and I was like, Oh my god. Since then, I've looked at a lot of other OSR sites and come to the conclusion that yes, OSR is still alive and strong. Yes, OSR is thriving. Yes, there's been some branches off that people don't necessarily agree on. But for the most part, people are of the minds that more old school is better. And I'm going to, move all this into my discussion of retro clones and such in my next Tabletops and Taverns thing. But that was my experience with it. It was enough. My experience with it, with Dragonsfoot, was going onto their forums as somebody who is familiar with the OSR movement but not a part of it. Going onto their forums and seeing something that looked like every bit as bad as some of the modern gaming forums that I also do not frequent because of the same thing, except directed pretty much at themselves. Because it was OSR person against OSR person. It was, I've been on the internet since the late 90s, but this was bad. This put me off the video, and it put me off from visiting that website, quite frankly. So that's my experience with that. I do not have experiences with talking to Frank Mentzer. I do not actually talk. There's very, very few of the old guard D&D people that I've actually... No, in fact, I don't think I've spoken directly with a single one, although I've exchanged emails with one or two of them. So my experiences with them are limited. I understand they're not... I'm not a fanboy because I understand that people are people. So even people like the late Gygax, whatever, they weren't saints through their lives. They had, people have issues. But at the same time, everything that I read about anybody who has been in direct contact or even online contact with Frank Mentzer says that he's pretty much a decent guy. You can't have a complete perfect individual, but on the sum total, he's a decent guy, and that this whole blow up, there's got to be some things behind the scenes that made this blow up happen. So does it hurt Dragonsfoot? Well, let me put it to you this way: if you're relying as an expert website, if the reason people go to a particular website, if you got a website, any website, whether it be RPG related, whether it be sports related, whether it be whatever, and you say, okay, our website, we're going to make it an expert website, which means that people are going to come to us, not necessarily because we're flashy, not necessarily because we're going to offer new stuff, but because we are a compilation of expert opinions. And as part of that, we're going to have interaction with some of the old designers and stuff. If you bill your website as that, and I don't know that Dragonsfoot does, but they come damn close. If you premise your whole website on that, and then you start losing those original designers, that's an entire chunk of your expertise just down the toilet. Now you're going to be, because of the way D&D is, because of the nature of the time, and because of, quite frankly, the continual march of the years, your pool of talent, or your pool of experts, is going to go down the tubes. You're going to have people perish, like pretty much the entire, I think there's one of the original people involved with the original inception of D&D, and I believe that's Wesley, because I know Arneson's dead, I know Gygax is dead, and rest their souls and such, but you've got this continual march of years, and the first generation perishes, and then the second generation you got to rely on. Many of them are ill or have their own health problems going on, and hopefully a lot of them will be, hopefully the majority of the ones that are still with us will be with us for years to come, but you can't count on that. So if you're kind of you got on one end, you got the Reaper ticking off your expert opinions, and then on the other hand, if you got your attitudes ticking off from the other side, that's a shrinking pool. And so, does it help or hurt Dragonsfoot to do this? I don't think it helps them. I don't think it helps them. They have their reasons. They no doubt have their reasons, but I think that in the long term they'll find that this particularly might hurt them. Supposedly they've been very protective against about the old guard in the past, and that the old guard have been allowed to basically say some things that other people have not been able to say on that thing. But it looks like the era of that is coming to a close here, and if more power to them. If it helps them, it helps them. But I gotta say from this, from an outsider's perspective, as somebody who dabbles in the OSR, somebody who appreciates the old editions for what they are, and in fact still runs them, even though my gaming groups would rather not. I ain't got time for that. I ain't got time for that kind of policies. Now let's go ahead and take a look. There's a bunch of other sites that give you. There's not a whole bunch, but there's several other OSR related sites that still give you decent content. But let's break down that whole. There's one part in there. There's one part in there that kind of stands out to me in that whole issue where they went ahead and removed Frank Mentzer, where he says that there have been irreconcilable differences between him and the ideology of this website. What does that even mean? So the ideology of Dragonsfoot, what is their ideology? Now that's the question they have to ask themselves. Because as I'm looking at this, he was promoting Imperia, which is a commercial product. That commercial product is a Kickstarter that has not even launched yet. That promised to make the setting that's involved with compatible with some of the old school D&D stuff. That's not hard to do. That isn't hard to do. I have at least a half a dozen really solid products sitting on my hard drive right now that were released as PDFs that were compatible with old school D&D and retro clones thereof. It's not a difficult task. So if this is a product, like if their ideology is their stated focus on Dungeons and Dragons old school stuff, then a man promoting a product and trying to get feedback on a product that supports old school stuff doesn't violate their ideology. So they must be talking about some other ideology. And as far as I can see it, that ideology boils down to either A, that he was promoting a product that isn't compatible with a particular version of old school D&D, which might be the case, but if that's the case, they need to go ahead and put narrow the focus of their site in terms of the what they play even more. Or they mean that their ideology, when they say that, is a non-role playing. It's not, doesn't have anything to do with the edition so much as something like a political or a genre ideology. I don't know. But it takes it away from the systems that the site supposedly focuses on in violating an ideology. Now, if he means that everybody gets together, that's not the case. Because if you read through all of their forums, I see a lot of people like especially on Tenkar's Tavern where a lot of this discussion was going down. And I actually encourage you to check out that site, tenkarstavern.com. It's an excellent blog for old school stuff, if you haven't already. And they recently put out a Swords and Wizardry Light thing, which I actually feel kind of bad that I didn't cover more than I did. You might want to check out their stuff there. Not totally plugging their site, but it's a decent place. Yeah, from the discussions there, what I'm looking at is that there's a couple people that are defending Dragonsfoot, basically saying, "Oh, it's an open place." But as I said at the beginning of this video, they're sitting there saying there's a lot more people that say it's a place full of harassment than those that aren't. So the real question is if there was some disagreement that did not have to do. I mean, I gotta admit, Frank Mentzer called him out. He called them out straight up. But when he called him out, he was not incorrect on stuff. He was not incorrect, at least from an outsider's point of view. An outsider looking in, looks at this stuff, he was not incorrect. Like, factually, not incorrect. But, anyway. Looks like it's just a messed up thing. It is a messed up thing. I wish Dragonsfoot the best, whatever. Just, I think they're shooting themselves in the proverbial foot. But as the years go by, there's less and less of the old school people to kick around. I wish Frank Mentzer the best with his new setting. I would love to be able to chat with some of these old school people before they finally kick off. I think the closest one was that one of the people behind Ice Kingdoms, which is a good setting, and he's actually one of the people that's defending Dragonsfoot. They have their reasons, but I think it's a poor choice for them. I think it was a poor choice for them, and I think that, like, as an outsider looking in, I think that I know. Not necessarily I don't know, but I don't know what's going on with their site. I don't know what's going on with that whole conflict, but I know where I stand on it. As an outsider looking in, looking at the things that were thrown back and forth, and in fact the years of history behind this. This was just like the thing that broke the camel's back. Yeah, it's pretty clear that I'm not gonna be visiting Dragonsfoot forums anytime in the near future. They are a decent site for the rest of their site in terms of their resources and stuff. I can still recommend, but that's about it. Anyway, what do you think on this matter? Should sites more clearly define their ideologies? Should they go ahead and shoot themselves in the foot by, removing somebody who doesn't conform with those ideologies when they stretch the rules for other people? He broke the rules technically, I believe. Like, when it comes down to it, he technically broke, like, some sort of a non-trolling thing. But then again, when the rest of your site's doing it, does a selective enforcement help your site? And what do you think about the old school people kind of moving on in life and getting these projects out while they still can effectively? I mean, these are people in their late 60s and they're moving up on 70, and they're still putting out commercial products, bringing their imagination to the game. I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing overall. What do you think? And finally, final question: do you want to see more of these rants and stuff come up? Because I just had to address it. I might do like an entire separate thing with like RPG crawler rants, because I know there's been several instances over the last week or so where I've just like ranted in message at somebody on IRC chat and whatever, and then realized, wait a minute, maybe I should be doing this as a video so that my viewers on YouTube can get a sense for it. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here at that. This has been the RPG Crawler with a rant. Don't even know what I'm going to call it. If you want to see more of these, let me know in the comments below. If you've got any feedback, let me know. Subscribe for more RPG content, and until next time, take care and goodbye. I have to go record some more Let's Plays.